Hi everyone, welcome to a tactics video. This time I'm going to review all of the Astra Militarum battle tanks. By battle tank I mean anything with a 2+ save and is meant to be a relatively offensive unit as opposed to say an indirect unit or a transport. If you've seen my other videos, I'm more into a very spreadsheet type of guy and I try to make things quite mathematical and pragmatic in my assessment. So I'm going to go for all the units here. I've basically put them all here, most of them. And as you can see in front of you, I'll just zoom in a little bit more, is we list out the units. Their key stats such as movement, save, wounds, leadership, OC value, points, and then points per wound. I mentioned some key keywords, their abilities or their rule abilities, number of weapons, which is a bit of a new way to think about things, and then what will be their main weapon, their main turret weapon. And typically here, if you've got a choice, I go for what is probably the better of the choices. Now, what I've also done is anything in grey, this is the resin Forgeworld units, to which you can see they're officially, as per the index at the moment, I think 7, although as we'll check out the UK website or to look at some of the units, some are no longer available. Now I'm doing this because we're now a year into 10th edition. We had numerous point changes. We just had a pretty major change from our rules in the index, being a change to the regimental or army doctrine. Completely been changed, the way that these units work. But before I get into individual units, I want to state a couple of things. So firstly, if you don't know, there is a new pivot rule, which makes it very clear that when you move a vehicle which hasn't got a base, every time if you move it like that, or like that, and you do it numerous times throughout the vehicle's movement, that counts as 2. So back gone are the days having to measure sort of like a wonky distance or bendy tape measure. Now, if your Leman Russ moves 5, has to go around a corner, that's 2. It's got 3 inches of movement left here for a total of 10. So the pivot rule makes things a lot clearer, and actually, if you've got a big long movement for whatever reason, you actually can get a lot of pivots and do a bit of a Tokyo drift around terrain pieces, making things a bit easier. Now, linked to that is also a new ruling that anything which hangs off the model outside its base, which basically will be the sponsons on all these vehicles here, you can move through terrain as long as you finish on the other side of that sort of narrow gap. That's okay. So if your base of the miniature can fit through that terrain gap, but the sponsons can't, that's okay as long as you finish on the other side and not within the terrain piece with the sponsons bouncing off things. So that makes it easy to get for a lot of terrain placements. So particularly in the competitive play scene, and definitely in the UK where I play, that is a real limitation. It certainly makes things a bit easier. Another one to never forget is tank shock. The stratagem has been changed significantly, and I initially missed this, but it used to be based on the strength of the unit. So in most of these cases, it was typically strength 7. So it's 7 dice. Rolling a 5+ is a mortal wound to a max of 6. Now, as we look at the toughness of all these units here, we're talking minimum 10 to 13 dice. So your odds of rolling mortal wounds has almost doubled. Well, probably like 60% more, yeah, because you've gone from Hellhound, I'd say, I think it's toughness, it's strength 7, so they get extra 3, so call it, about a 55 to 60% increase in number of dice and chances of actually doing mortal wounds. So that's really going to help us. It's just that fantastic. Anything which can do mortal wounds is great. Now the other one, and this is what I've got the keywords of squadron here, is that basically regimental units get lethal hits at any point when they can see a target that is not a monster in vehicle. And squadron units get lethal hits at any point when they can see the target that when they shoot into a vehicle or monster unit. And the key reason why I put this here is that several of these units do not have the keyword squadron, which means you have no regimental doctrine, full stop. You can receive orders. We're going to do that in a bit more later. But to note, tank commander and all of the Titanic units, being the Macharius and the Baneblade family, you can see I've only put 2 of the Baneblade family here, have no regimental doctrine, full stop. So that is to be considered. But certainly as we look at them, it's probably less of a bit of an issue because given they're quite shooty and quite deadly already. But when you sort of weigh things up, you have to remember that they have no regimental doctrine, full stop. So that's pretty huge. Now, the other ones down the bottom here, these are all the Titanic options. The Macharius is a Titanic model, and so of course is the Baneblade family across the 8 variants. And I've just put 2 to keep us quite focused here. Being Titanic means you cannot fly Overwatch. And now that would be, and this is where I've plonked this here, is that, you know, on the Baneblade you've got, and I'm pretty sure I got this right, 13 individual weapon platforms or individual weapon systems. You know, you've got 4 twin-linked heavy bolters, 4 las cannons on top, that's already 8. Then you've got the main battle cannon, you've got demolish, blah, blah, blah. It all ladders up. So in this instance, like, if you could Overwatch on a Baneblade, imagine, like, even if it's just heavy bolters or 4 twin-linked heavy flamers, but you cannot Overwatch on that unit, on these units. So that means things which aren't Titanic, such as the Rogal Dorn or the Malcador Defender, you've suddenly got a much, much better chance of actually doing something in, or being able to do Overwatch. And then also if you're doing it to the right target, such as other vehicles, you're obviously going to you're going to hit the target plus also win at the same roll. So very powerful there. Now, and if I just go back one step, I think the other thing about the regimental doctrines as well, so I just played a game into Blood Angels, fantastic match, where my vehicles had also in that instance no regimental doctrine. Now granted, most of the heavy stuff I was firing from my Rogal Dorns and my Exterminator Leman Russes are wounding on 2s anyway. Do I need leaflets and infantry? But in that case, no. So I think the other overlay is to remember that in certain matchups and scenarios, you have no regimental doctrine for these units. And likewise, it'll be the same. Potentially, you're playing infantry and you play, for whatever reason, like another mechanized opponent who's got just all vehicles. So a bit of a point there. Now, key stratagems is obviously smoke. That is very, very effective. And never to forget, it also gives you the benefit of cover. And Armoured Might. Now, I'm going to check Armoured Might to 2 CP stratagem, which against shooting attacks, -1 damage. So against, you know, maybe a lot of plasma incoming, that is fantastic. But I just want to check, does it have a keyword restriction? So Armoured Might, okay, no, 1 Astra Militarum vehicle. So any of these models can use the Armoured Might stratagem for 2 CP in your opponent's shooting phase to be -1 damage. Now, obviously, if you use stratagems on big units, you get more payback in the sense, you know, they're obviously worth more. So if you do Armoured Might on a Baneblade worth 480, you're going to get a lot more bang for your buck than you are on, say, a Hellhound. Now, of course, situationally dependent, but the other way to think about it is that that stratagem essentially makes, you know, if your opponent has got strength 3 weapons or strength 2, they almost have to double the number of successful wounds, if that kind of makes sense. Well, it does. So, you know, if they had to, you know, do plasma shots with a damage 2, that's now damage 1, you need to go from landing 12 wounding ones to 24 wounding shots. So just one to think about. I personally don't use Armoured Might a lot, because typically Guard is a relatively unit heavy list, and you should have a lot of redundancy in your list already. Okay, our final 2 points. Or final 3 points is Tech Priests do have a bit of a role potentially. A 2+ save is serious business, everyone knows that. And in the world of 10th edition, vehicles will should always have cover. So you're probably going to be, you've basically got free Armor of Contempt. Now, that means nothing in melee, obviously. And that is where maybe having a Tech Priest could be beneficial. Because against serious melee threats, they may have AP3 or AP4 if really unlucky, and then suddenly your glorious Rogal Dorn or Baneblade saving on a 6, and that's pretty bad. But I would say, broadly speaking, from my experience, that there's not a lot of AP3 out there for melee, and if I'm wrong, please tell me. But Tech Priest agencies definitely are one to think about, maybe if you're going to go heavy on vehicles. And of course, they also heal D3 wounds, and if a vehicle gets blown up near them, they get 12 attacks with their axe, which is very fluffy. Now, the final one, which is linked to a Tech Priest, a good joke here, is to magnetize everything. So I've been lucky enough to play Guard since the back end of 8th edition, and I've learnt to magnetize everything on all the vehicles you own. So magnetize the Baneblade to Octoblade, and I've got a video here, I think it's the little clickety button, to magnetize that. Magnetize all of the Leman Russes. I've got a video here as well. And the Rogal Dorn is simpler to magnetize because it's just one weapon or main weapon option. But you never know in 11th edition, whenever that comes out, suddenly all this analysis means nothing, which probably will because things will change. But magnetize everything, magnetize sponsons and magnetize the main weapons because things will change when you give yourself options. Okay, so from all that, hopefully you learned one or two things. Now let's get into the actual units themselves. Now, the Hellhound is the baby of the group. The baby, in the sense, it's got a toughness of 10. It moves 10 as well, I believe. OC 315 points, and it comes in at about 10 points per wound with rounding. So I've actually shown more decimals as 10.5. Yeah. Now, it's cheap. 10 points per wound is obviously the cheapest of the bunch. And the other thing which I was going to add the actual physical measurement of this is the thinnest of the group. So you should have little problems getting a little Hellhound to whiz around the board because it's got a narrow model. It's the same size as the Chimera or Chimera. And you should have no problems fitting that model around the board. Now, it's got two weapons. It's basically got the front sponson weapon, which will probably take a multi-melter. And it's got the main weapon being the melter cannon, which essentially is a melter on steroids. So it's D3 shots, which are blast, melter 4, 9 AP4, D6 damage. So cheapest of the bunch. You've got a multi-melter on the front and a melter cannon on top. Now, is the actual cannon itself any good? I don't know, D3 shots into blast targets. You're going to land, like 3 shots against infantry. You're going to melt maybe 2 models because you probably miss one of them at least. So it's good against heavy infantry. Yeah, great, but but against vehicles, strength 9 is wounding on 5s, and you're going to get let's agree 4 shots in total. 1 will wound, maybe 2 will wound. Probably the opponent fails 1. You're going to do like on average 6 damage, let's agree, across all the shots. So is it a vehicle killer? No. But that arguably multi-melters in this edition aren't vehicle killers like they used to be, but they will vaporize any heavy infantry. But then the ability, strip cover, means essentially it's AP1 because everything gets cover. So this could pair up quite well with other units, which I think is definitely the way to view things, is the synergies you can drive across your total list in amongst these unit options. And I've got a very firm combination I think is quite good. I'll get to later. Right, let's move quickly because there's a lot of Leman Russ options. Now, the cheapest of the bunch is the Vanquisher at 145, the Eradicator, and the Punisher. Now, they're cheap for a reason. They're so cheap, and I've tried this before. 3 Vanquisher battle cannon, Leman Russ, 145. 3 of those is not even 500 points. It's actually 450 points. Now, the thing is, you've got 5 weapon platforms, systems. You've got the main cannon, front las cannon, 2 multi-melters. Then you've got a stubber. You've got a hunter-killer missile once per game. Don't include the calculation. But across these 3 here, the Vanquisher, unfortunately, in my opinion, doesn't work. I took it into a team tournament. I think across the course of 5 games, I think I must have killed about 4 models because it always misses. It always fails to wound, and then your opponent saves it. It's just the joke. So, it's the cheapest of the bunch. Is it like a highly competitive choice? I don't know. But then compared to, say, the Eradicator Leman Russ, which is then 150, and if you don't know this, basically, what makes this one worthy of consideration is, unlike the Vanquisher, which has got 1 shot, D3 plus 6, not D6 plus 3, D3 plus 6 is serious business, yeah? And the other thing, of course, is strength 7, meh, AP1, meh, 2 damage, okay. Ignores cover means essentially, in most 10th edition games, that's theoretically AP2. Also, the other thing about this is, into infantry targets you're wounding on 3s, but into vehicle targets where strength 7 would suffer, given we've got the new regimental doctrine or army, whatever it's called, you've got lethal hits into vehicles, suddenly that could be the little bit of extra spice that makes this burrito a bit more tasty. You've got a minimum of 7 shots, at least 1 or 2 of those is going to be a lethal hit, then you've got the rest of the wound rolls. So actually that could make this a bit more of a balanced doctrine in the sense it's good into infantry always, and because it's got lethals into vehicles and monsters, it's also good into them as well. Okay, so I'm going to color code things because I always forget. I'm going to give this one an amber. You're an amber. Apologies, it's got to be the right one. So amber, I'm going to give the Vanquisher a red, and then I don't know about the Hell Competitor. Okay, Punisher, I think unfortunately there's just no need for it. It does dev wounds against monsters and vehicles with your glorious 20 shots on its AP 0, 1 damage, 6 strength, 6 weapon. Yeah, it's cool. I would love to play it. I've got the miniature ready to go, magnetized, but no, unfortunately. And if you think otherwise, tell me. Okay, the next two getting a bit more expensive: Executioner Plasma Tank and the Exterminator Autocannon Tank. Now 170, 13 points per wound. The Executioner, and if you don't know, it basically has got a 36-inch range, mega plasma cannon, D6 plus 3, blast, of course hazardous, strength 8, AP3, 3 damage, or strength 7, AP2, 2 damage. So this is going to do a lot of good work into heavy infantry. Flat 3 damage means basically all heavy infantry except the toughest, with 4 wounds out there, is dead, including things like Custodians, Orcs, and Primaris Space Marines, the big boys. So that's good. But I think unfortunately its ability is a bit crap. So below half strength target +1 to hit. Okay, great. So you've got to basically wait till thumbing is below half strength to actually get the +1 to hit. So this for me is a bit of a meh. It is always going to be, you could argue AP3, 3 damage is good, but strength 8 and an ability which only works when things are busted isn't getting much excitement from me. Now I'm exceptionally biased on this one because I'm having fantastic success with this one here, Exterminator auto cannon one. So the key thing it does is its main cannon grants out AP1. So other units that shoot after that into that target AP extra 1, which is fantastic because it can stack with other abilities or other rules. Now if you don't know, 40-inch range, fantastic, and shoot the entire board. Most of it, 4 shots, however rapid fire 4, which means at 24 inches you've got 8 glorious shots. Strength 9, AP 1, 3 damage, twin linked. So you've got a rain of death coming down, so 8 shots within 24. Twin linked means against heavy infantry you're going to be doing a lot of work, and against vehicles you will give them a bit of a tickle, of course. Yeah. Now if you haven't used a stratagem, Fields of Fire, to give you the extra AP 1 is a letdown. But from weight of fire, this definitely is one which will work quite well. And then this probably of all of them, in my perspective, is the best candidate for Overwatch because, as you can see, everything else except the Gatling cannon, which is a Gatling cannon, everything else is variable damage. And if you've been playing Guard for a while, you know the joy of spiky dice, where you may roll 9 shots on your Demolisher cannon or 4, and do that for 3 turns in a row. Versus, if something moves within 24 inches, which is the Overwatch range anyway, you suddenly got 8 guaranteed shots, and you should hopefully roll, being positive, positive about it, at least 2 shots will hit. And then given, if you do Overwatch into a vehicle, those 2 Overwatch successful hits are automatically wounding. So this, I think, it's a very strong option out there, and that's what I think. On the sense it's consistent, and on this, given the sense also it can grant additional shots after from other units and the additional AP. And again, as I said, in addition to 40k where everything gets cover, particularly big vehicles, anything which removes AP or gives you extra AP is where the money's at. Okay, the Glorious Battle Tank. Now, it's a bit of a shame this one because this is a classic model and it should have classic rules. So, to be fair, reroll 1s and full rerolls against targets on an objective is fantastic. So, organically, this thing is deceptively accurate. So, a reroll 1, I think, basically makes this, and forgive me for saying this, but this would be a ballistic skill of 3.5. If that makes sense, it's almost like, you ballistic skill 4+, you can get orders, of course, I know that, but organically it's almost like ballistic skill 3.5 because the reroll 1s boost the math a little bit more, or full rerolls would make it actually ballistic skill 3+, based on math. The one thing about this though, and again, I hope you agree, is that the AP1 on the battle cannon is just not good enough. That's not enough. Even if it's working with an extended auto cannon, it's only AP2, which becomes AP1 with cover. The opponent's who's got maybe a 2+ save saving on a 3, boo-hoo. So unfortunately, the battle cannon, Leman Russ, is not a hot option, but given it's quite accurate, it is going to be an amber for me. Okay, now getting onto the Demolisher Leman Russ. Now this is where we have to cast our attention back onto the points per wound discussion, because this, compared to some of the options you can see as we go down the list here, feels quite expensive now. Now, again, from several balanced data slates, the other tanks all got a lot cheaper, the Leman Russes, but this has stayed the same. So has the tank commander as well. So 200 points, 15 points per wound. Its ability can shoot and melee with no modifiers, certainly is good in some instances. You can ram it into things and then blast away into combat with its very spicy weapon. Now, the Demolisher Cannon has been nasty for the last 2 editions. It continues to be, and I think the profile actually is identical, but 24-inch range, as you know, quite stunted, D6 plus 3 blast, strength 14, AP3, D6 damage. Now, this in isolation is amazing. This means you're going to be wounding everything on a 3 minimum. I don't think there's any toughness 14 models out there. So everything you shoot is minimum of a 3, if not a 2. AP3 is fantastic, and D6 is where the Emperor may favour you or cast you off into the warp. Because again, I've rolled numerous 1s and 2s, but when this thing spikes, it will clear things, obviously. Now, I did say about points per wound, 15 points per wound, as a bit of a spoiler, as you compare to some of the other units out there, 15 points per wound feels a lot now. Based on the points per wound calculation. So obviously it's the most expensive of all of its Leman Russ siblings, but for a reason, because the main weapon has the potential to be devastating, but it is getting quite expensive. So that's the Demolisher for me firmly is an amber. Now the tank command at 16 points per, let's check the mathematics here, because probably it's okay, it is rounding, although it is, call that, 0.4, or let's just be simple, 0.5, an extra half a point differential. The 205 ticks it over. So the tank commander, the key thing is not squadron, which means it doesn't get a regimental doctrine, and it also has to take orders only from Lord Solar. Now everything basically is the same. You do get to issue a tank order up to 12 inches. That is helpful, and you also get to shoot on def on a 2+. Now personally, I've struggled to get value out of tank commanders. I think anything which requires it to die for you to get value is a bit weird, because you might play a good game that doesn't die. Although, does that mean you have to be quite aggressive? I've just never got value out of them. And the other thing is, in the current rule set, is that if you're in melee and you die, you can't shoot in melee. So I personally have never found value in tank commanders, but again, loads of better players than me have. But then 16 points per wound, as we look at the options, I think it's probably overcosted. So this for me is an amber. And the other thing, not to dwell too much, is that you're shooting on 4s when it dies. So I've done it I have done it a couple of times, and literally just everything missed because hitting on 4s. Yes, depending on when you get an order though. Right, now, spoiler alert, I think the Dorn is fantastic now. It was always at a point where it was pretty decent. I think at one point it was 270. It went to 260, now it's 240. Now 240, you can see simply from a absolute point cost, it's 40 points more than a Demolisher Leman Russ. But the critical element is it's 13 points per, which puts it the same as the three 170 point Leman Russ tanks here. Now the other thing, whilst it's a points per win calculation, which is fine, the other benefit you've got is that toughness 12 is that little bit extra, which means that against las cannons and dark lances and other las cannon style weaponry, they're winning you on a 4, versus all of these here, you're getting wounded on a 3. So that that will deceptively make it more survivable than you think. And also, it also obviously means against strength 6 melee weapons, which is somewhat common, they're going to win you on 6s, no longer 5s, because obviously against hits, winning on 5s, but hits suddenly winning on 6s. Now, the other good thing to never forget, as I said, is the number of weapons this thing has. So it has got 7 or 8 weapon systems, and it's 7 or 8 because if you take the twin link battle cannon, it's 1. But if you take the oppressor cannon, it's 1 plus a coaxial auto cannon, which also is ballistic skill 3 plus, so it's more accurate. Now, the other one, which you need to know when to use, and it depends on the matchup, this can be either good, it's always good, or it can be fantastic, is you can turn one save into 0. Now, what you want to obviously use is if your opponent shoots you with a Vanquisher battle cannon, you just blank that save because they have potential of doing 12 wounds. You just go damage 0. Now, where this doesn't help, and as I experienced in the game against my friend Jamie, who plays Blood Angels, is when they're all damage 2 melee weapons, you can blank 1, you damage 2 wounds, yippee. But this essentially makes the actual wound count higher. So let's agree it's an extra 3, 21 points per wound. You're suddenly talking 11 points per wound. Now, that's the only ability it's got. So this thing basically is just a weapons platform. And I think its weapon, the one I would suggest, the oppressor cannon, is the best weapon system we have access to at a similar point-ish cost, yeah. Now, strength 12, granted, means against other Rogal Dorns, you're wounding on 4s, but against pretty much everything in the game, you're wounding at least on 3s, AP 2, and then flat 3 damage with a very long range. You've got no restriction where you can shoot everything in the board. So even at turn 1, when things have been pushed back quite far, you can shoot everything regardless of where they are, as long as they've got line of sight. And then, of course, you've got like the belly cannon, which is 24-inch, D6 shots, 9 AP 3 damage. You've then got multi-melters. You've got nipple tassel melters, like to call them. Then you've got a stubber on top to shoot down any aircraft because it's on the top with a guy firing up in the air. So the Dorn feels for me very effective, and I've certainly seen, lots of opinions online that do agree with that. And I think, and again, build your own adventure, but if you were playing, say, 2 Demolished Leman Russes before, 2 Tank Commanders, maybe just drop them for, we got to find extra 80 points, of course. But Dorns feel for me very, very nice now. They feel very nice, and it's cool because they look cool, except they've got a big gap in the bottom, which makes them a bit lighter. Right, now on to the Forgeworld units. Now, let's just go through the UK website to make sure, to actually remind us what they look like and if they're still for sale. So, okay, here is the Malcador Infernus, sold out online. Okay, that's interesting, which typically means that it's no longer available. So, point number 1. Okay, so that's the Malcador Infernus. Now, the thing with this is it's expensive, it's resin, it's a pain in the ass to work with. You get your fingers stuck together with super glue. And this does make me super nervous that this will disappear eventually. Maybe they're going to relaunch it, don't know. But of course, if you can get access to it cheaply via a recaster, a lot cheaper than that, that's great. So let's check its rules. So interestingly, it's toughness 11, same as Leman Russ, 2+ save, but it's got the same wound count as Leman Russ. Okay, so 235 for this one here. It's 13 points per wound, which is the same as a Rogal Dorn. Its rule is it can shoot its main gun on death on a 3+. Okay, 3+ is not nice, and it's only got 4 weapon systems because it's got sponsons, it can have a stubber, and it's got the Infernus cannon. So what does the Infernus cannon do? 18-inch range, D6 + 3, automatic shots, ignores cover at 5, AP2, 2 damage. So this is just basically a glorified Hellhound, albeit the Hellhound's flame cannon isn't as good as this. Great candidate for Overwatch. Obviously you can still Overwatch because it's not a Titanic model. But 5 AP2, 2 damage means you've got what is going to be a very long model to maneuver around the board. Granted, you can obviously pivot easier now. But you've got quite a big model with that should be at least like strength 6, yeah? I mean, that thing's terrifying. It's massive. It's like the entire thing's just a flamethrower, but is a competitive choice? Unfortunately not. And again, I'm taking I typically play a competitive environment. If you don't, and you play a more relaxed environment, then this would be awesome to play. You can just cook your opponent with that thing. Okay, now the Malcador. This has had a new tank released, and this is obviously links to Horus Heresy. So, new tank. It's quite long. I own one of the other variants. It's quite long, but still quite thin. Versus the Dorn I missed is quite fat, big boy. And interestingly, if I just look at this here, is given it doesn't have sponsons, you will have less problems fitting through things, and maybe even a Leman Russ, maybe. Definitely compared to a Rogal Dorn, I'll get through things easier. Now, again, it is 18 wounds, toughness 11, it's 14 points per wound, and it gets free Armour of Contempt. Always has Armour of Contempt. So Armour of Contempt is basically -1 AP. So both in shooting and melee. So that means you've essentially got a 1-up save, which would make this thing survive a lot longer than it should. And I've definitely seen some commentary from some of the subscribers out there, you in the audience, who said that this thing does deceptively hang around. Now, the only thing is, it's only got 5 weapons, albeit it's the same as a Leman Russ. It's going to have its big boy blaster cannon. It's going to have 3 sponson weapons and a stubber. So just like a Leman Russ. But the one bummer, I think, that is a real bummer for this, the Malcador, is that the battle cannon is only strength 9. Now, it's 10 to 9 probably is less of a break point. Although actually saying that, I think it's like a lot of vehicles, I think Rhinos toughness 10 or 9. But either way, like a 9 against a Rhino means you're wounding on 4s, versus Leman Russ battle tank, you're wounding on 3s. So either way, it is a break point actually, that would make you less deadly into, say, a Rhino if it is a toughness 9 versus other tanks which are toughness 10, obviously. So that's a bummer. But I mean, 250 for something which will hang around forever, because obviously against the nastiest of melee, say AP3, you're saving on a 4+, which is still pretty good in the scheme of things. It's obviously squadron. It can receive tank orders from a tank commander. So this, I might actually give this a green, because 250 feels reasonable for something that's going to hang around forever. And what your perspective is always important, because I'm only one person. Now the Annihilator, now this one has no official model. I did look for it, and that's also a bit of a bummer, is there's no official model, but the actual model was just simply a twin-linked las cannon on top, and it's also got a demolisher cannon in its belly. So the Annihilator, basically under halfway, the target gets no cover, which is good, because a demolisher cannon's 24 inch, so within 12 they've got no cover. And then its main cannon, which is a twin las cannon, which essentially is a twin-linked las cannon, is AP3. Now the problem with that is one shot is garbage. You're always going to miss, and they probably always wound. Well, actually, this twin links you probably will wound, but one shot, it's like a one shot for D6+1. Like, you're going to do an average of 4 damage. You're going to poke this thing out and try and blow up a tank, and you did 4 damage. I mean, great. Does have a demolisher cannon, but I think I'm just going to make things easy for myself. If you can't buy it unless you get a recaster, that's worrying, because that must mean they're just going to discontinue it. So, but one shot from a las cannon is just not good enough. Okay, the Defender, and this is a bummer because I bought a recast. Now it's massively overcosted. Let's be real. It's 17 points per wound. Yeah, it's 310. What does it do? Overwatch on a 5+. Cool. And what has it got? It has got 7. It's got 7 heavy bolters, 2 on the side and 5 on the top. It's got a demolisher cannon, and it can have a stubber as well. So, 7 heavy bolters, which are sustained as well. It's 21 shots. Overwatching on 5+ means you're probably going to land at least 5, of which some will be sustained, so you're going to get extra hits. So it's good. A Demolish is also fantastic, but just 310, it's just no. And again, it's a bummer for me because I bought a recast. It looks awesome, but I'm probably never going to play it because I typically play quite competitive scenes. So Overwatching on a 5+ is great. If it was free Overwatch, didn't cost you a CP, that would make it pretty good, and you'd always do it, obviously. But given you've got to pay a CP to Overwatch on something which is worth 310, and is actually the highest points per wound of all of the non-Baneblade family, just means this is a computer says no, unfortunately. Right, Macharius Vanquisher. So the Macharius Vanquisher. Okay, so the crucial element here is this is the Titanic models. Now, I've never actually seen a Macharius, which is a bit bad. I've been playing Guard for quite a few years now, but I expect it to be quite a big body, be a big booty model, probably quite big booty. Now, if we actually check out the actual model itself, is that the sponsons look to be quite narrow in comparison to the actual model itself. But that still looks to quite a big bertha, quite a physically large model. Now it's temporary out of stock, which probably means they're just reprinting up in Nottingham in Britain, making up more stock. So what does this do? It's the cheapest of the Macharius at 14 points per wound, 285. I think one thing also I should say, OC8 is serious business. That means your opponent needs to put on 4 battle line models to out OC you, as opposed to a Dorn, obviously, or a Leman Russ, which can be achieved a lot easier. So OC8 is serious business. But I think also, before I progress on this one, is that this will genuinely struggle to fit through most terrain sets. You probably, and I did take a Storm Sword to an RT once and got my ass kicked because definitely in UK terrain it was basically stuck. It had one place to go on the board, and that was it. There were several maps where you couldn't get outside my deployment zone. It was just stuck there, just denying these fire lanes. Now, that would be kind of okay if you've got lots of DACA. Let's see how much DACA this thing has. It's got 5 weapons. It's going to have its big blaster cannon, front weapon, which is twin-linked heavy stubber, and 2 side weapons and a stubber. Okay, so it can reroll hits against monsters and vehicles. Okay, so essentially is a ballistic skill of 3 against monsters and vehicles. And it's got 1 shot, which is 18 AP4 D6 plus 6 damage, twin linked. So obviously it's just like a super nastier version of the Leman Russ Vanquisher battle cannon, because it's twin linked, and it gets to reroll hits against monsters and vehicles. So, again, if you don't play hyper competitive, you play for fun with your pals, this is awesome. Take it against someone who plays knights and just see this thing just blow things to pieces, which would be glorious. Is it competitive? Absolutely not. And if you disagree, always tell me. Okay, the Macharius. So the Macharius is the classic. It looks freaking awesome with its twin-linked battle cannon. So obviously same footprint, same comments. It may struggle to fit for a lot of terrain sets, but it is also, before I forget, toughness 13. So this then means las cannon dark lancers go from winning you on a 4 to a 5, and that means a lot of armies will genuinely struggle to get rid of this thing. So I just dismissed the Vanquisher. It is the cheapest of the bunch, but 16 points per wound for this thing, which will struggle to be cleared. It does have potentially maybe some merit. Maybe if you're playing in more sparse terrain sets or still in player place terrain, something like the Macharius definitely would have merit. So it reroll 1s against units on an objective, which is a situational ballistic skill 3.5. I'm going to stick with that. Twin linked battle cannon, basically is a main battle cannon but reroll win roll, with the key challenge being the AP1. Now, I think, as I'm sort of exploring this in my head, 5 weapon systems on a Titanic model isn't a lot, actually, as you think about it. Only 5 weapon platforms, weapon systems, for something which is mega, maybe just squishes this, unfortunately. So the Macharius, I'll give that an amber, simply because you know, its weapon system is reasonable. You know, D6 plus 3 shots, twin linked means you will get more wound rolls than your opponent would expect. But it's definitely not a competitive choice. Now, okay, the Macharius Vulcan. This basically can shoot into melee with no modifiers. Its primary weapon is the Mega Bolter, which is 16 at 6, AP 1, 2 damage, sustained 1. So you're probably going to be popping off at least, I don't know, 16 shots, popping off 3 sustained. So you're going to go from, you know, 16 shots to 19 shots if they all hit. And I don't think... Oh, it does have a model, so the Vulcan, yeah. So it looks awesome, fantastic. You know, if it could Overwatch, it'd be great. But how many points per win is it? So Macharius Vulcan is 16 points per win. Oh, it's cost the same as Macharius. Now, I don't think this, outside of, you know, casual players, got much legs, because 6 AP 1, 2 damage against vehicles. Well, it's got obviously lethals against vehicles, but, you know, 2 damage if you want to do serious work against vehicles isn't that great. And given it is quite a big investment, 310, I don't think it's a competitive choice. As opposed to, say, an Eradicator, where that theoretically makes more sense here, because, you know, it's 150, it's half the price, it's getting lethals just like the... Actually, no, it isn't. Oh God, sorry. So this is not getting lethals. Okay, forget it. This is not a consideration. It doesn't do anything against vehicles, because it's 6 AP 1, 2 damage. You don't get lethals. Okay, I'm very well given. I think it's quite a few reds here, and not many greens. But okay, so I've only captured 2 with the Baneblade family, because there's 8, and I didn't want to type out all 8, to be honest. But I've chosen the cheapest and the most expensive. So interestingly, I didn't know the Baneblade was the most expensive, and I got it wrong, tell me, but its ability is trash. Obscured friendly units get the benefit of cover. Now, again, this situationally could be amazing, but given 10th edition is an edition where it's easy to always have cover, this doesn't really do much. If you're playing maybe like mega matches of like 6,000 points, and you're going across open fields, and it's awesome, and it's like one of these is leading the charge, you've got the boys behind it all strung out, that would be cool. But in competitive games, this rule essentially does nothing. Now, the other thing is points per wound on this bad boy is 20 points per wound, so you're paying a significant premium for obviously the higher toughness, and in this situation, an incredible amount of firepower. So the Baneblade cannon essentially is, well, not essentially, it's 3d6 blast, which is spiky. You could get 3 shots, 12 AP2, 3 damage. It's essentially the same profile as the Rogal Dorn. Granted, it's 3d6. Now, 3d6 makes it super unreliable. As I said, you could roll 18 or you could roll 3. The average would actually be 3, 4, 5. That's 12, I think, is the average. The technical average, or the flat average is 9, if that makes sense. If you know math good, better than me, please tell me what the actual average is here, because it's 3d6. And then, of course, you've got a Demolisher Cannon. You've then got 4 twin-linked heavy flamers, heavy bolters. You've then got 4 las cannons, and you've got a twin-linked heavy bolter in the front, and you've also got a stubber as well. So this thing is the quintessential weapons platform. Now, standard commentary, as per the Macharius, outside of player-placed terrain, I don't think this has any merit in competitive play. You definitely, and again, it depends. You may get matchup lucky and just come up against someone who can't deal with them, and then you put them in a place where they obviously can't move because of terrain. But basically, they just spend the entire game denying a couple of key fire lanes, where if your opponent moves through, they just get blown off the board. Because all of these weapons, except for the Demolisher, have got at least a 36-inch range. The heavy bolters, the las cannons, and also the big boy blaster. Or you put flamers on it, and no one's coming near it. Now, you can't Overwatch. It's crazy, crazy tough. 24 wounds. It'll take probably a Primarch to take this down. I had actually Angron one-shot my Shadow Sword or Storm Sword, so it can happen. But is this a competitive choice? No. Unless unless you're playing player place terrain, which I don't. Okay, then the cheapest option is a shadow sword, so 18 points per wound. Now, what does it have? It has basically the volcano cannon, which is glorious. So you get devastating wounds against monsters and vehicles. Okay, cool. But you only get D3+1 shots, which is blast, if you fight into blast vehicles like maybe like Tower Crisis suits. But D3+1 is okay. It's heavy, which means you can basically make this thing hit on 2s via a order from Lord Solar. And then the actual weapon itself is just comical. 24 strength, AP 5, 12 damage. So, you know, given you've got another heap of weapons after that, you are going to one-shot pretty much all vehicles. Of course, AP 5, they've got an invul save. It could bounce off, but AP 5 means against... Even with cover, no one's got a save. Well, no, they've got a 6+ save. If they've got a 2+ save and you're shooting with them in cover, they've got a 6+ save. But then use your stratagems to support this, suddenly they've got no save. And a 24 strength weapon means against all vehicles except other Titanic units, you are wounding on 2s. So hopefully the Emperor favours you and doesn't give you a 1, because that is always the way it goes. And basically the key difference is you don't have a demolisher cannon or a twin-linked heavy bolter in the front. I think I could have got my math wrong here. Actually, it doesn't have a heavy stubber, I believe, but you still got 4 sponsons with twin-linked heavy bolters, flamers, and las cannons. But it's just a competitive choice. I mean, it's certainly cheaper, and there are other options which are a bit more. I just got the cheapest one, but I don't know. I mean, I was really burnt by my experience when I took a super heavy to an RT, and I just couldn't get value out of it because my opponents, because it's so terrain heavy in the UK, they just hid everything from it, and then I couldn't get value out of it. So, very aware, I've given a load of stuff. Only 3 things are red, and even in the Malcador. But now this is my perspective, and please in the commentary tell me what you think. I'm having great success in the first 6 games of Pariah Nexus with a Rogal Dorn paired with external autocannon Leman Russ, because AP1 makes basically everything extra AP1, obviously, but it makes the oppressor cannon suddenly AP3, it makes the belly cannon AP4, it makes the multi-melters AP5. You can then stack before then fields of fire, and I still use Ursula Creed with a mortar team to get you that extra AP, because obviously this becomes AP4 main weapons, and multi-melters become AP6, which is against pretty much everything unless it's a armor, contempt, and cover, no save. So the Rogal Dorn feels for me a very effectively priced model at 13 points per wound. Makes it feels very achievable. You know, 18 wounds, which we could agree is 21 wounds when you blank a save. Toughness 12 certainly is fantastic. And then, you know, if we can then compare it to the comparable other units, well, actually, toughness 12 is it's only the one. It's the only one at toughness 12. So it's just in a bit of a unique spot where against las cannons and dark lances, for example, they're wounding you on 4s. So the next comparable models as far as OC concerned is the Malcador family. Their toughness 11. Their shooters are nowhere near as good. However, the Malcador, I think armor contempt in an edition where free armor contempt or permanent armor contempt in an edition where you've always got cover means that, yeah, even against AP2 weaponry, you've got a 2+ save if you're in cover. Oh boy. Yeah, tasty. Actually, that's getting me all excited, actually. Oh. But then the thing is, no, bummer, because then there was just the strength 9 AP 3 damage battle cannon. But, yeah, so, yeah. And then, you know, I think you could definitely debate, like, Demolisher, it is 40 points cheaper. Maybe the Demolisher's still a green. And then, again, Tank Commander, Leman Russ, Demolisher, you know, a lot of you still get value at them, and if you do, please tell me. You know, shoot on death is no joke. Use it quite aggressively. Don't get it stuck in melee. of course, but shoot on death is essentially, if it dies in the last round, that's the last round, that's 6 turns of shooting. But I feel confident with this assessment. This is my perspective. If you disagree, tell me and tell me why. I learn a lot from you in the comments. I always read the comments. I might not always reply to you, but I usually try to leave a little like love heart thing, a little like thing, whatever I can do as a creator. Hellhound. I think a Hellhound is an amber because it can stack, remove cover, extra AP, fields of fire on top. Rogal Dorn's coming in. Rogal Dorn's coming in at AP gazillion, multi-mils, AP 7 maybe. Woo. So, what do you think? Do you think I've made a relatively correct assessment? I'm very strong on the Dorn, my personal perspective. They look awesome as a model, and I think rapid fire 4 twin linked autocannons do work. Now, what's your perspective? If I've got nothing, tell me. If I've got anything wrong, please tell me as well, because I need to know. And what do you think is what is the state of Astra Militarum battle tanks, and which is definitely your favorite? How do you use it? So yeah, if you enjoy this video and want to support me, you can do so with a like, comment, or by subscribing. Joining my Patreon platoon if you're feeling super generous, or just watching any of my other YouTube videos. I'm a true Astra Militarum variety channel, covering everything from the tactics, like this video here, and I'm quite like sort of analytical on how I approach it, like lots of spreadsheets, if you like that type of approach. The hobby aspects are just painting, kit bashing, and assembling, and also the lore, and look at like old codexes, old rule books, but also bring a bit of my ex-military experience to the fore, and basically had a lot of videos where I've sort of asked the question of how realistic is the Cadian war gear, Cadets and Jungle Fighters uniform, or say the Rogal Dorn battle tank. Massive thanks to my current supporters. To get your bayonet up, last gun oil, Faith from the Emperor Strong, Patreon platoon, sound off. Tank Commander Glenn, Tank Commander Watchdog Van Etten, Tank Commander Mitchell, Lieutenant Burke Nielsen, Lieutenant Smith, Colour Sergeant DuPont, Sergeant Adal, Scott, the Colonel Merrill, Veteran Gibson, Hall, Lundeen, Guardsman Beard, Coquelin, Flint, Hills, Malik, Nitton, Nguyen, Tom, Tompkin, Conscript de Paz, England, Evan Gunn, Gillian, Goodwin, King.